Hello and welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel, and tonight we're doing our last of our daily lockdown videos, and the reason for that really is the fact that today we've actually come out of the lockdown number 2. So tonight we're going to do a video on Christmas once again, but this time updating you. In other words, the last video ended with the end of the Great War in 1918 and 1919, and this one will take you from that era up to the 1950s and also the start of the 1960s, because very simply Discover History covers any age from the Stone Age up to the 1950s and the early 1960s. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So at the end of the Great War, people looked forward, and that was really down to the fact that the First World War was said at the time to be the war to end all wars. So people thought that the future, the 1920s, 1930s, was going to be peaceful, relaxing, and people would get on with life again. And that is, in a way, what people started to do. And Christmas was put back on the calendar. And there was a lot of firsts. For example, in 1932, King George V actually gave his first King's speech, and obviously that was done over the wireless, and that was a tradition that started in 1932 and even continues today. Elizabeth II, our present Queen, she actually did the first televised broadcast, and it's interesting because both of them chose that 3 o'clock slot, and that's really down to the fact that 3 o'clock was the best time to get reception and also broadcast to the whole of the Commonwealth. Now, with modern technology today, including, for example, the internet, you wouldn't really need to worry about that today, but I think it's absolutely fantastic that we still follow that old tradition that goes back to the 1930s. Now, people brought out the Christmas tree, and people decided to have a good Christmas using commercially bought decorations. Yes, commercialization is here, more so than ever before. And most people actually bought streamers. And these were usually in different colours, the most popular being red and green, because obviously they are Christmassy colours. And you would unroll them and you would put a twist into them and draw and pin them to the ceiling. And they're quite nice. It makes a different type of decoration than, for example, the paper chains or even the holly, ivy and mistletoe, which our pagan ancestors would have been doing way back in ancient times. But there was also some very strange decorations that were purchased and put up as well. And I say strange because you don't really associate them with Christmas. But if you have a look at photographs from this era, the 20s or the 30s, you do see them appearing. And that is the Chinese lantern. Now, they look like this, so they're very flat. People were purchasing them in large amounts, and all you do is you pull them out, you extend them, and these were very popular. Lots and lots of people had these hanging from their ceiling as well. So people got on with life, but the problem is, below everything that was going on, so below the 1920s and 1930s fun times as such, really, there was a few issues with money. For example, we have the Wall Street crash, obviously, and then there was also the rise of fascism. And unfortunately, on the 3rd of September 1939, we go to war against Germany for a second time. So unfortunately, we're back at war. Surely Christmas will be wiped out with this one, but it wasn't. It's a sad time because there was a lot of people serving in the forces, for example, the Army, the Navy, the Royal Air Force, but there was also a vast amount of evacuees. Over 1 million children were moved from the cities on the 1st of September 1939. So very simply, there was families completely split up in this new world war. But luckily, when we went to war, there was a lot of advice. This is the Boys' Own newspaper, or the Boys' Own magazine, cost 6pence, for December 1939, so the first Christmas that we ever had. It does actually say the weather forecast on here, which says more snow, and believe it or not, if anyone watched the weather forecast today, there is meant to be snow on the way, so you never know, we may get a white Christmas. But in magazines like this, it does actually give you advice on how you can make do at Christmas under fire again, really, Christmas at war. So people would look at those and seek advice, because you have to remember all this mass production of streamers and so on suddenly went over to war work. And the other thing is there was food shortages and paper shortages along with everything else. So people made do, and magazines like The Boy's Own gave advice. You could, for example, create your own party hat. This one's got Christmas 1941 on. So either packaging or a newspaper, painted or not painted. This could be worn upon your head at Christmas time, which is a very, very fetching hat to wear at the Christmas table. If you find a good picture in the newspaper of, for example, Winston Churchill, you can make your own Christmas card. There we go. Cut out his face, add a little Christmassy hat, a little Christmassy message, and there we go. That can be given to someone in the household. But when it came to decorations, people really pushed the boat out. And in a way, we had to learn from our ancestors. Greenery, like holly, ivy and mistletoe, was brought in. And some people brought in a twig and stuck it in a flower pot. Interesting thing, the King of Norway got a gift of a Christmas tree that was put up in Trafalgar Square, and interestingly that is still carried out today. And you have to remember the King of Norway was in exile in Britain during the Second World War. But we've got some decorations here that is made out of paper, very much like the Victorians. So paper chains. We've got a piece of paper with slits cut into it, that glued together with the flour in water once again makes the paper lanterns. But my favourite that a lot of children made, and these took me a long time to figure out how to do it, is the people holding hands, which actually makes a very good frieze around the walls of your home. And once again, these can be painted or left unpainted. But it was a war which involved a lot of this make-do in men. Christmas was now a make-do thing, and a lot of people even took old jumpers or old socks and pulled them apart. And these things were used, or the knitting wool was often used, for example, for new socks, new jumpers, for example, great gifts at Christmas time, or decorations. And we've got here some baubles to hang up on the tree, and these are made from pom-poms. And the way these were made during the war, and I've seen advice on how to make them, is you take the cardboard top from a milk bottle. They were all cardboard tops years ago. Take them out, and they have a little hole in the top, and what you do is you wrap the wool going all the way around, and then when you cut it, it then becomes a pom-pom, as you just saw, and they would hang on your Christmas tree. Now, my mom makes quite a few things, and she actually made me these earlier in the year. And these are little Christmas crackers. Once again, these are crocheted, I think, more than knitted. And these were made out of some off bits of wool. And these can be made and hung on your Christmas tree. And personally, I think these are absolutely fantastic. So to my mom, thank you very much. They're very, very useful. And like everything, it all gets some use. So people had to improvise with their Christmas decorations, and they also had to improvise with their presents, their gifts as well. Now, some people would have had homemade toys, for example, knitted toys, rag dolls, for example. I know a lot of parents that were good with their hands, for example, dads that were good in the shed with carpentry tools, for example, made ships and aircraft, and they would be painted, wrapped up and given to children. And the most common form of wrapping paper was in fact newspaper and parcel string, like that one there, which makes very good wrapping paper, especially when you think about that once you've opened them, the paper gets thrown away. Unless you're my dad. My dad always used to take the wrapping paper, smooth it out and try and peel off the sellotape years ago. Very strange thing to do, but hey ho, it's a good eco way of living, really. I actually wrapped up Christmas presents one year, probably about 20 odd years ago, using newspaper, and people weren't impressed, which is quite sad, really. But that was me reminiscing on the war years. Not that I was there, but I've read about it, you see. So you don't really need to spend vast quantities of money. People are worrying that now we've come out of lockdown, yes, we should be supporting businesses, especially local businesses, but really we can actually make a lot of things. We can make our own Christmas cards, we can make our own decorations, to be fair. When it came to gifts, however, it was very traditional. Maybe a penny maybe an apple. You're definitely not going to get an orange during the war. And then to add to that, you might even get, for example, the children's or boys' own newspaper, something along those lines really. And they're fantastic gifts. I've even seen people that used to cut up tea towels and turn them into ration book covers. I've even seen crocheted gas mask covers as well. So we don't have to spend thousands and go shopping when technically you can make your own gifts. And people find that homemade gifts are actually quite nice, to be fair. A lot of thought's gone into them. But saying that, remember to support your local shops. Try to avoid the big shops, go for the local ones. Anyway, eventually the Second World War came to an end, but problems didn't end there. We know rationing continued into the 50s. And talking about rationing, there was a problem during the war and after the war with Christmas dinner. People were encouraged to dig for victory. So when it came to sprouts and things such as cabbages in parsnips, that was fine. But the problem was with the meat. And I know during the war and after the war, some people just had spam on Christmas Day. I've actually seen a recipe where you take the spam, you mould it in the shape of a goose. Remember, that's the traditional one. And then cover it in strips of bacon. And it sort of looks like a goose. It's mock goose. They had a lot of mock things during the war. But as I said, after the war, there were still problems. Rationing continued and people were still making their own decorations and making their own gifts. But slowly, especially when you get to the 1950s, so towards the end of the 1950s, once again, all these factories that had actually done war work went back to doing normal things, and slowly paper, for example, became more accessible again. So by the late 50s, definitely into the 60s, mass production came in again, and mass production came in when it came to decorations, and we've got a few here. We have, for example, these tissue paper decorations, and you're probably sat there now reminiscing, because I know I remember these as well. And what you do is you open them out and you attach what looks like a paper clip, and you can hang them from the ceiling. But they're just tissue paper. They're absolutely fantastic. Just as long as you be very gentle with them, you can wrap them back up and bring them back out the following year. But we've also got here a bauble made in red and green tissue paper. So once again, open it out, put a paper clip, hang it from your ceiling. Absolutely fantastic. Even I remember those. But then when you start getting into the 60s, tinsel becomes the big thing. Anything shiny becomes the thing of Christmas. Saying tinsel is a 60s thing is wrong in a way, because we had it earlier. It's just that by the late 50s, early 60s, it became common again, really. So here we have our colourful Christmas. It's back. The shiny, mass-produced Christmas. I've also got a fantastic sign that is 1960s originally, and carried on into the 70s and 80s as well. And once again, mass-produced plastic, covered in shiny things like glitter. One thing I will also mention is, if you remember back to putting candles on a tree, by the 1950s and 1960s, even though they were around before that, the fairy lights were a common feature, a plugged-in set of lights which you had to fiddle with the bulbs for ages. And even though I don't own any, for example, 1950s fairy lights, what I do own is the actual bulbs from fairy lights in their stereotypical vintage style. And these will go on the tree, brightening up your tree, which is a little bit safer than having candles on them. But as I said, post-war Britain, post-Second World War Britain was an era of mass production. So we have all these new decorations being produced. People are spending more money now, and we've got things like mass-produced Christmas cards. The most traditional thing on a Christmas card, the robin. Anyway, when it came to waking up on Christmas morning, most families would find there's ice on the inside of their window. Very, very cold, no central heating. Most people would also have their coats draped over their bedding in the night because it was so cold. But hopefully you've got a pillowcase. And you're probably thinking, why would you have a pillowcase? Well, for most people, that was more common than a stocking or a sack, and the pillowcase would be crammed with all the new things. You may have a Meccano set, maybe even a train set, or maybe the latest doll, for example. And because we're into a mass-produced era, it may also be covered in mass-produced printed gift wrap, along with sellotape, not parcel string anymore. When it came to the gifts, the ultimate gift, most people will tell you, has to be the annual, like this one here. And there was a vast amount of different annuals going, really. Most people mention the Beano or the Dandy, for example. It's a big thing from the 1950s, even though they were around before that as well. But they're really big, and they're fantastic because you've got cartoons, things to do in it. There's also stories, short stories, for example. Heroic war stories is often you find in an annual as well. And to make it easier for your parents to buy things, you could also get things in catalogue form. Now, Worcester's quite lucky. We had the K's catalogue, which many people will probably know if you're from Worcester. We've also got the Timothy White's catalogue here, which has got all sorts of things in, including, for example, Christmas crackers, fairy lights, all sorts of things in here. So you can sit at home, decide what you want, take it into the shop, or find a representative, and that will help you purchase your Christmas gifts before Christmas Eve, and then put them into the stockings or pillowcases for Christmas Eve, Christmas morning. But by the 1960s, there was a lot more on offer, a lot more things out there, including food. You could get all sorts of food, and turkeys start to become common, more so in the 70s and 1980s. And if you think back to the old Yule log years ago that had become a table decoration with a candle in it, that had actually become a chocolate log that most people have on the table even today. So hopefully you've enjoyed these videos. We've enjoyed making them. Do subscribe, do still follow us. We will do videos, but they won't be daily anymore. And remember, it doesn't matter what is thrown at Christmas, be it, for example, a ban in the 1600s, be it the Great War, the Second World War, Christmas will still be here. And the amazing thing is, we're now discussing what Christmas is going to be like with COVID-19. Well, maybe in 10, 15 or even 20 years' time, I might still be doing talks on Christmas through the ages, and I will be reminiscing and saying, remember in 2020 when the safest and best thing to do was to stay away from family members? It's quite an interesting one, really. Christmas has had a lot thrown at it, but it's still here. Anyway, on that note, remember to subscribe, make sure you comment, let us know what videos you want, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.